The acquisition of Dewberry is the perfect example of Glen trusting the recommendations of his employees. This engraving business had some very unique issues that needed to be addressed. And even though it was a good fit for Taylor, we also needed to do what was right for the environment, for our employees, and for Taylor as a whole.
When Dewberry came on the market, what interested me is they had a couple of things that I thought that would help us. We always tried to improve in the graduation market, and we never did very well because we had Jostens and Herf Jones who had really established in it. But we always tried, and we built a sizable business. They already had some business down in the southeast of the United States, so that interests me. The other thing is that they were engravers, and they knew how to grave, and they had really a good workforce. They had really a history of doing a good job. So that's what interests me, and when they put it up for sale, I was interested. So I told the guys to go ahead, see if we can get it purchased.
It was an engraving company. John was going to be the overseeing it with our new manager we were putting in there. And John had been a plant manager. He had been a supervisor in letterpress, then he was a plant manager out in New Jersey, and then he became an operational VP overseeing the wedding companies, stationery companies. And so he went down to Dewberry and was out there, and he went out into the plant and was talking to different printers at the presses. And he some comments about some detailed things about the presses, because John was familiar with them. And the employees were like, you know about presses? He says, yes, I used to run them and everything. And we expect our managers to know everything about them. Gosh. Well, the owner of Dewberry had turned the company over to his son. And he had no interest in it. And he was interested in buying computers. And he was spending money buying computers and trying to sell them. But the employees said, we've never seen the son. He never comes down here. We had no idea who he even is, relationship. Never involved with the company. So you can see why it tanked very fast. But we've always expected our people to be not only familiar with the operations, but to be out talking to employees.
This was actually an awesome learning experience, I think, for Glen and I. We bought Dewberry Engraving, Birmingham, Alabama. It had been a, 120 plus year old engraving company, fine art engraving, classic presses, old equipment. When you looked out the back door of the plant, you looked down over this pretty little creek running through the edge of Birmingham, Alabama, and what looked like an asphalt pathway down to the creek. It wasn't asphalt. It was ink sludge. It had been dumped out over probably the full length of that business had been in existence.
I think either Greg or Larry said, I think I saw some green frogs in this pond because of all the silver and chemicals that they were dumping into it. So it was a pretty unique story.
We're still going to pay $20 million for the business, but we're not going to buy the building. We're going to pick it up and move it on day one. And I remember sitting in Glen's office explaining this to him, and you could just tell he thought this was incredibly wrong. And he allowed me to explain it for 30, 40 minutes. And he just said, and Craig, at this point I was probably, maybe I'd been with Taylor for 5 years. I'd been with him maybe for a total of 10. And he just said, if that's what's right, then do what's right. And I'm walking away from a building that probably had a real estate value of $1 million, $1.5 million. And we moved it, we got it done.
Greg Jackson came back and was saying, we don't want to do the deal, walk away from the deal, unless we can do a deal where we just take the assets right out of the building. One day they own it, next day we're gone. We never have control of that building. And that was really going to be a challenge because we had never done anything quite like that. We've done things where we moved in a week or 2 weeks, but never in, we just moved in a day and got business going again. And I would tell you that I don't know all the details. I trusted those guys. They said they could do it. I trusted that they could do it. They performed and did it well, but it's why you want to have people around you that you really trust.
6 months after we closed, the federal EPA came in and declared it a Superfund site.
Engraving, I mean, the very caustic, materials that they use, and that they were just dumping them, supposedly dumping them properly, but they weren't. And that company had been there for so long too. So yeah, that was a good walk away.
If you think about now our environmental practices, Taylor's historic environmental practices were actually very good. The safety, it goes back to opportunity security. Safety, environmental, all those things were always really good. But this was our first thing where we found somebody who ran a business that just was oblivious to environmental concerns. And I think that was one of those opportunities where you say, Glen trusted his people to do what they thought was right, even if he didn't fully understand it at that point. Now, a year later, everybody understood it, and it was really great and obvious, and certainly from my perspective, I didn't care about that. I just didn't want the liability hitting Taylor Corporation. And so it was one of those opportunities where all of a sudden, things like phase 1s and phase 2s on acquisitions, which weren't even, like I said, this is 25 plus years ago. It wasn't a common thing at that point. It became part of our policy and practice much earlier than for many of our competitors. And if you watch all the environmental liabilities going on, especially in the printing industry, because it's a notoriously bad industry in a lot of areas, we've avoided that almost entirely. I think our worst cleanup, we bought a business and had to spend $100,000 on cleanup, which in that world is nothing. So it was an opportunity where Glen's going to listen to the information. You give him the information, even if it's something that's not on his radar at all, he can consume it quickly. And half of it was, there's a rational explanation here that he can consume, and half of it is, I'm going to trust my people. They're going to make some mistakes at times, but I'm going to count that they're going to do right more than they do wrong.